Hi, and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. Hopping on today for a quick touchdown on Kyle Richards and the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I have to say I've been so drawn to Kyle this past few seasons in a way that I'm not even usually drawn to Kyle, because I think that I experience her at such an interesting crossroads in her life where it feels to me like she's hovering right on the precipice of real possible transformational change. One could say the new way, and then there's the old way. And it just feels like she's right in the crosshairs between both. And I think what I'm aware of when I watch Kyle on the show is, first of all, I think I want to be one of the lone voices of what we might call support for her in her journey, in the sense that I really want to acknowledge the huge changes that she's been making in her life. I mean, she's really dismantling her life in a really deep and potentially powerful way. You know, I feel like because we watch these people on TV, sometimes it's easy to emotionally distance ourselves from them because they're more like TV characters than they are real life human beings. But for Kyle to be entering into this separation from Mauricio, when this marriage has defined her for so long, this is not an inconsequential thing. I mean, it really needs to be stated. I mean, Kyle, I looked it up. She's 56 years old. She's squarely in her mid-50s. She's been married to Mauricio for decades. Her identity, not just as a wife, has been important to her, but specifically as a wife to Mauricio. I mean, we saw that in the first few seasons. She was deeply invested in the status and the safety and the emotional comfort and the protection of being married to a handsome, strapping, outwardly supportive guy like Mauricio. It meant a lot to her. And it defined a huge part of her identity. And especially when you think about where she came from in her childhood, if we're to believe all the murmurings that we've heard about how the Richards sisters grew up, being trained and conditioned from an early age to land a man, to keep a man. I mean, these were women who were raised, really instilled with the value that you receive as a result of the man that you land and then keep. And Mauricio, for Kyle, was a keeper, and the whole world saw him as a keeper. And so, like I said, this was something that she was deeply invested in. I think she's been deeply invested in her identity as a mother as well, you know, mother to her 4 daughters, 3 of whom came from Mauricio. And this is something that, you know, she has said it herself. She assumed this was going to be the rest of her life. You know, she assumed she had a life partner in this guy. And there was a certain default assumption that she was going to grow old with him. She would have him by his side. There was comfort in that. There was safety in that. There was stability in that. Again, I just keep hearing and feeling the degree to which this was such a huge part of how she defined her identity. And so to then arrive at the age of, now she's 56, last year she was 55 when this happened, and to really be taking a stand for herself and to say, wait a second, I actually don't know if this is working for me. I actually don't know if I'm fully fulfilled this way. And I'm actually open to the idea of walking away from this. That is look, that's a huge thing for someone to do at any age. But to be squarely in your mid 50s when you had all these assumptions about how the back half of your life was going to go, and to be willing to walk away from that, like I said, it is a huge thing, especially becoming an empty nester. She's losing her identity as she's still a mother, of course, but she's losing an aspect of her identity as a mother. And now she's possibly losing an aspect of her identity as a wife. And then on top of all of that, I really want to bring this in, especially because it's been met with a lot of, admittedly justifiable skepticism. We'll maybe get into that a little bit about the coy way that she's navigated this new relationship. But there is this, we don't really know what's going on. That's the whole point. That's why people are pissed, right? Kyle's been very peekaboo. Now you see me, now you don't when it comes to Morgan Wade. Clearly, she's been playing little coy games with the viewing public and the press. Clearly, she's been getting a lot of mileage out of it. And so that understandably pisses people off. But let's just put all that aside for a moment. And let's just stay with this notion that there's some sort of relationship that she's been cultivating and pursuing with Morgan Wade. And I want to say even that to me just feels like such a huge deal for someone like Kyle, because it's not just that she's willing to walk away from her marriage, but she's like exploring her sexuality. And again, to what degree it's authentic, who knows? But it feels like there's something there on some level. At the very least, she's letting herself sort of be out there in the world with this question mark around her sexuality and engaged in a process of exploring her sexuality. And I just say this because, again, I think from the 2024, that's where my mind is. The 2025 perspective, it maybe doesn't seem like a big deal. And again, especially someone who are watching on TV, who's a part of the Bravo network, I think there's a way that it can be overlooked that for someone like Kyle, this feels pretty fucking huge. My sense, again, of how she was raised, even though it was in Hollywood and it was in the entertainment industry, there's something about it that to me feels pretty fucking old school. I think there's like a conservative bent to it. I mean, again, especially when you look at Kathy Hilton and the way that she landed her rich man and the way that she sort of conducts her household, there's a very kind of old school vibe when it comes to gender roles and what's important in life. And I just get this sneaking feeling that homosexuality, I don't know that was really an option for these young women growing up in this household. I don't know that Big Kathy was maybe the most tolerant woman in the world. I'm not saying it was like an outwardly homophobic household or anything like that, but I just have to imagine this wasn't really in the cards for any of these three young women as they discovered their identities. And so this is all just to say, it isn't lost on me that Kyle's been letting herself pursue a relationship with a woman. And it again feels like something else that she might really be dismantling inside of herself in terms of letting herself be open to a new version of her identity. And that all this stuff has to be really fucking scary for her. I mean, it has to be really scary to be in your mid 50s, looking ahead to your 60s and 70s and truly not knowing, am I going to be alone or not? Am I going to be partnered or not? Just not even knowing what your life looks like. I mean, she's at an age where most people are really settling into what they're planning for the third act of their lives. And they have a sense in their minds of what it's going to look like and who it's going to be with and what the plan is. And Kyle is going into it with a huge question mark. And so whatever else you have to say about Kyle, whatever other game she plays with the media or with her cast members or this or that, there is something in me that just really has wanted to acknowledge the place that Kyle is in life right now is not a joke. And she, like I said, she has been letting herself dismantle her life in deep and powerful ways. And I want to say before I kind of pivot to bring in more threads, I feel for her. when I watch the show. I really do. I really feel for her. I feel for how scary this must be. And I feel for how out of control her life must feel right now. And I really do have compassion and respect for the position that she's found herself in. And I want to say too, this to me speaks to the part of Kyle that I do think is a seeker. And I've always felt this in her. Like, and I guess in some ways, this is what I want to explore in this episode is Kyle's always been so interesting to me because it feels like there's been this push pull in her between wanting to get to the truth, wanting to create the possibility of transformation for herself and those around her, wanting to go deeper, and then also being so scared to go anywhere deep and staying enmeshed in codependent relationships, unhealthy patterns of repression, defaulting to sort of playing the part of the distressed little girl. There's always been that tension. The tension between integrity in relationship and also still vying for power in relationship. So, one of the moments that people really talk about all the time usually in terms of criticizing her, but is that defining moment in season 1 in the limo where she outs Kim's alcoholism and, declares that you're an alcoholic and everyone knows. And to me, that moment, it really typifies that tension of opposites I feel in her, where it feels like there's two things going on at once where, yeah, do I think it was a shitty thing to do? 100%. Do I think it was vindictive? 100%. Do I think she was trying to out Kim in a way that on some level was designed to humiliate and embarrass and expose? 100%. But do I also feel this part of Kyle, and it brings in this whole question of just even her decision to bring Kim onto the show. And the question of whether or not Kyle in some way was exploiting Kim's clear addiction issues and dysfunction as fodder for the show. And it's a legitimate question. However, within that, I also feel in Kyle throughout all of this, throughout bringing her sisters onto the show, almost like the part of her that does want to expose things, but not for the sheer sake of being shitty and vindictive, but for the sake of bringing the truth out. For the sake of her family system having to finally confront things. I mean, Kathy, Kim, and Kyle have all acknowledged they were raised to keep family secrets secrets. They were raised to be silent about things that we don't want out there. There was value and currency in that. And I think Kathy and Kim really play by those rules. And what I see in Kyle is the little girl in the family who's saying, wait, let's talk about this. Wait, let's get it out there. Wait, let's be in deeper relationship with each other. So I do feel like, again, it feels double-sided to me. Like, I feel like there's like a shitty aspect to it, but I also think there's this part of Kyle that wants the truth out there so they can finally fucking get somewhere as a family. Like, I feel like Kyle, if she knew that her sisters would actually be down for it and would go all the way with it, I feel like Kyle would be willing to sit in a good family therapist's office and hash it out. And I feel like she'd be willing to lay down harsh truths. And I think she'd be willing to hear harsh truths. I think deep down in her soul essence, she is someone who is oriented towards truth-telling and transformation. And again, she gets so much grief for just be open and honest, just be open and honest. Do I think she wields that in a manipulative, hypocritical way on the show? Yes, 100%. Absolutely. There's some sort of unconscious game she plays where she demands transparency from people while not necessarily giving it herself. I understand all that. But anyone who's familiar with my content knows I also think the seeds of truth are in everything we do. And I don't think it's an accident that we constantly hear Kyle talking about just be open and honest, just be open and honest. I think there's something in her that actually really does want openness and honesty. And I think there's something in her that really is oriented towards deeper truth and the transformation, which is, again, I think why we're seeing her actually make these really scary decisions, because something in her is a seeker. And I think there was a part of her that just felt like if I can get them on the show, in a way, it'll kind of force us to deal with things. What I'm also thinking about as I say all this is just the fact that she did create that TV show, American Woman, which was about her family and her mother. Now, again, it's another example of almost like a half-hearted, compromised version of going towards the truth, right? Because it's based on their mother. It's based on their family enough to where Kathy got furious with her because it's breaking the family code of silence, right? But it was still like a really sanitized version of it. It was like the G-rated Disney version of it. It was like the idealized version of it. Like she wasn't really getting into the meat of what actually went on with her family. So to me, there it is again. It's like this impulse in Kyle to get stuff out there, to go for the truth, to break the silence, but then she's scared to do it all the way. And it does both feel like a fuck you, I'm speaking up. I don't care what any of you have to say. I'm exposing the secrets. I don't care. And also, guys, don't you see what I'm trying to do here? Let's be open and honest with each other. I want us to connect. I want us to heal together. I want us to be an actual family. Again, I feel both sides of it, which is what kind of makes it so dynamic. So the reason I'm saying all of this is that I see this pattern continuing to play out even now, where Kyle is making these really big, scary decisions. She's dismantling parts of her identity that have felt like all of her identity. And yet at the same time, as many people are noticing, she's still playing a lot of games. And it feels like even in her quest for a more congruent, aligned existence, she's still pulling back from the deeper truth. You see this in so many ways. I already talked about the Morgan Wade of it all. Just and I get it. Garcelle, guys, I love Garcelle. I know a lot of people have issues with Garcelle. This isn't about Garcelle, so I'm not going to talk too much about Garcelle. I just want to say I really appreciate Garcelle on the show. And I think she's just done such an amazing job of navigating this cast, this franchise, and the way that she deals with microaggressions and the way that she speaks up, but then she's still willing to play ball and move forward. The way that she's so savvy with how she plays the game of the show. There's something about Garcelle that I really respect. I love what she brings to the show. I think it's very subtle what she brings to the show, but I love what she brings to the show. Anyways, Garcelle saying it. It's like, look, you're essentially teasing us. You're dangling Morgan Wade in the press. You're making these little insinuations and sort of giggling behind a coy hand over your mouth. But then if we bring it up, you kind of protest, and act all like that's taboo and that's off limits. There's a game that Kyle's been playing with Morgan Wade. And then, similarly on the show, there's all sorts of double standards that she is embroiled in when it comes to her cast. And then, so many people have pointed it out, right? With Mauricio, they get together and they just have these kind of, I don't even know what the right word is. There's depth of feeling, but there's also a kind of shallowness to it where it's like you never actually see them go deep together. You never see them having the real conversations. It's like this braced heart and this clenched jaw. And it just feels like Kyle is entering into this deep process, but we don't actually see her doing the deeper, realer work of truly looking at herself and truly looking at the games that she plays with herself and others and truly dismantling those games. So again, just like with American Woman, she's like half in, half out. I'm creating the TV show to expose my past, but it's going to be the G-rated version of it. I'm not really going to give away any of the secrets. Like, yeah, I'm leaving Mo. I'm exploring with Morgan, but I'm kind of walking on eggshells. I don't want to crack any of these eggs too much. I'll kind of put the eggs on the ground. I'll tiptoe around the eggs, but I'm never going to crack the fucking eggs. And I've just been so drawn
again, to kind of that tension of opposites in her. And I was really thinking about it, about why. Why is Kyle taking these half steps towards dismantling her identity, deeper truth, possible transformation, but not going all the way with it? And as I was watching the show recently, it really hit me that for Kyle to truly undertake a deep inquiry where she's truly going to dismantle herself in the games that she plays, I think on a psyche level, on an unconscious level, for her, there is such a deep image and belief that she will end up all alone. And what I mean by this, I mean, in many ways, this is what I've already been exploring thus far. I think that if Kyle has to start looking at the game she plays, there's going to be a next step, which is she has to start looking at why she plays the games she plays. Where did she learn these games as a survival strategy, right? And then, if she's doing any kind of truly deep work on herself, it's going to take her back to childhood. Now, it's hard. We don't really know to what degree the Richard sisters are conscious of the possible darkness of their childhood. There's been a little bit more mention of it in the past few seasons, but as we all know, we continue to see Kathy and Kyle really put their late mother on a pedestal. Listeners of the podcast know I've read House of Hilton. Certainly the stories related to House of Hilton relay a terrifying childhood. Now, we have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, but what I do think is interesting is that recently Bijou Phillips released an autobiography, a memoir, and she relayed a memory. I don't know if she actually named the Richard sisters by name, but it leaked out onto the internet that basically this is with the Richard sisters. And I might be getting it wrong, but the gist of the story was she befriended Kim or Kyle or one of them. And she was over at the Richard sisters' house. And I think it was the Kim character who brought a guy home, and they were eavesdropping and spying on Kim making out with the guy, basically. And then Kim cut it short and then kicked him out of the house. And again, I forget the actual details, but the gist of it was that the mother of the family had trained the girls to fool around with men just enough to get them aroused and erect, and to then cut it short to basically, have them by the literal and figurative balls, to lead them on as a power play. And if I remember correctly, this memory that's recounted in this memoir is of Kim, or whoever the sister was, going to her mother with pride, being like, see, I did it. I made out with him and I got him hard and then I kicked him out. Now, I'm mentioning this because, this is a third party account. And it's also a first-hand account, if we choose to believe it, which I do. I don't really see any reason why she would lie. That one little memory right there, that's enough. You know what I mean? That's enough to suggest a deeply disturbing, traumatizing childhood. Because you essentially have a mother who is grooming her daughters essentially in a way to there's to be sex workers, which, no offense to sex workers. It's one thing if you're an adult making an adult choice from adult agency to do this for a living. It's a whole other if you're a young girl, young woman, adolescent, being trained by your mother and your mother giving you literal advice about getting a guy erect. It's so invasive and it's so violating and it's so covertly incestuous. And it speaks so much, again, to the values that they were raised with and the lack of boundaries. So this is all just to say, I feel pretty confident in saying that their childhood really feels like it was a horror show in a lot of ways, deeply traumatizing, which is why, again, I think you see Kyle being so compartmentalized, because I can imagine growing up in a household like that, having feelings and emotions would have been fucking dangerous. If you dare
to know your true feelings about what's going on and you try to speak up to a woman like Big Kathy, you think you're winning that argument? You're not winning that argument. If anything, you're just getting punished and humiliated and pushed down even more. There's no way you're allowed to feel your feelings in that household. And as I say this, I can also imagine an experience of if I even let myself know what's going on, I'm done. I feel like this with Kim, right? Like, I'm not going to survive. If I let myself know what's happening here, I'm not going to survive it because it's so fucking horrifying. It's going to take me out. So I'm saying all of this because I have to imagine, given what we see of Kyle and what we experience of Kyle, that she has not let herself even begin to know how horrifying this was. And, by the way, you guys, I'm bringing in my experience as someone who works with people on a really deep level. I would say, I always say half of my work. If you add up the halves, there's way more than two. But half of my work with people so often is really just starting to excavate their personal history and to really reflect back to them, wait, do you understand the depth of what you're sharing with me? I mean, this just happened recently with a client that I was working with in an intensive where, they would relay like a couple really horrifying memories, but say things like, well, I know it sounds like I'm complaining, but I know it's probably ridiculous of me to say, but, and I was just sitting there reflecting back to them. You realize that you're apologizing, like you're framing this as you're complaining about something, and then you're relaying this horrific memory that, to my mind, is 100% abusive. And it's like we're raised in our own ecosystems where abusive behavior or problematic behavior or destructive behavior, it gets normalized and excused and justified. And by the way, these are our caregivers and we're dependent upon them for our survival. So much like with the Richards sisters, we learn to normalize it within ourselves. Because if we don't think there's room to speak up about it, and if there's no help available for us, and if speaking up about it only makes things worse, why would we ever let ourselves know the full extent of what's happening? This is very universal. So half my work with people is just supporting them to see and claim the truth of their experience, this was a fucking nightmare. Doesn't mean I don't love my family. It doesn't mean there weren't good aspects to it too. But there were some really destructive aspects that felt like a fucking nightmare. And, what I'll say, I mean, this is a little bit of a digression, but again, as someone who facilitates this for people, sometimes just that is one of the most healing, miraculous agents of change for people, that they can finally breathe a sigh of relief and realize I am not crazy. The way that I experienced this was horrible. And I am allowed to claim that experience for myself. We don't get that support a lot of times. So anyways, coming back to Kyle, I feel pretty confident. She has not fully claimed the truth of her experience and how horrifying it was. And like I said, if she starts dismantling her own games, she's going to have to, at some point, have a day of reckoning of what she actually went through. And if she starts reckoning with what she actually went through, I think Kyle knows on a certain level. Oh God. See, I'm feeling this in my heart for her. It's like she's losing the support of her sisters. 100%. I mean, we see it with Kathy. Kathy is not going to tolerate it for an effing moment. Kathy will lose her mind if Kyle really starts to go there and really wants to claim the truth of what happened in our family system and really wants to have some hard, honest conversations. If she wants to change the relationship dynamic, Kathy will lose her mind. Now, Kim, I do feel Kim might be more open to it. Kim's more of a wild card. The problem with Kim for Kyle is, and I say this with nothing but compassion for Kim's journey, she's not well. She's unstable. She can't be counted on. She's got addiction issues. She's constantly in the throes of her addiction, which, by the way, I mean, not that anyone needs me to tell them this. Again, it's a testament to the depth of whatever these three sisters went through, right? I mean, you just see it all over Kim. But Kim can't be relied upon. Kim is not stable. And so I think for Kyle, there's a real sense of, if I go down this rabbit hole And I let myself know what truly happened in childhood. And I let myself have my feelings about it. And I let myself start getting into healthier, more boundaried relationship with the people around me. I am going to lose my sisters. And I actually think there's truth to that. Like, I really think she would, on a certain level, lose those relationships, at least with Kathy. And so I think for Kyle, there's such a bind here, again, especially because I think they were raised with such an us against the world mentality. Again, I think her sisters have been such a huge part of her identity. And I think for the little girl and her, so there's like a bind here. If like, I want the truth, I want to speak up, I want the best for everyone. But if I go here and if I speak up, I lose these relationships. And then I am so deeply and profoundly alone. I have no one. I have no one. That's what I'm here. I have no one. And I think that's especially true for her now in this context of this journey that she's created for herself, because it seems like she's losing Mauricio. You know, her daughters have moved out of the house. If I keep going and I go down this rabbit hole, I'm also potentially losing my sisters. And then I have no one. And I am left all alone. And I think her inner child, I think she's still on a psyche level, operating from the place of the inner child who feels so scared. Like there's this image, this life or death image that she will actually be alone in life. You know what I mean? With no one there to be with her, to help her. Like she will just be truly alone. And I think that childhood life or death, fight or flight, fear of abandonment, devastating, heartbreaking abandonment, I think it's running the show for her right now. And so I think what's happening in Kyle is she, in a way, is doing what we do as human beings, which is she is unconsciously creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of her own deepest fear. Because what happens, I believe, is Kyle's inner child that lives in her unconscious, that lives in her psyche, is so scared of being left alone that she will compromise her truth in order to hold on to some of these relationships for some sense of connection. Now, the bind here, the fatal flaw here, is that she's holding on to relationships that don't actually make her feel seen and heard. So I'm talking now with like Kathy and with Kim. She's holding on to relationships that don't actually give her the true connection that she seeks. It's like she's grasping for crumbs because she's so scared it's all she's got available to her. And then in the process, what she's doing is she's not fully connecting with herself, right? Because she's compartmentalizing her true feelings and she's not letting her true feelings flow into the world. She's not letting herself be in genuine relationship with herself. And so what happens is, you know, in terms of like law of attraction or principles of creation, I always say everything starts with our relationship to ourselves. So if Kyle isn't going to see and hear herself fully, she's not going to be seen and heard by the outside world. So that she's got the scared inner child who's so scared of aloneness and abandonment that she compromises herself in order to hold on to connection with people who won't see and hear her. And she's terrified that if she stops doing that, like I said, she'll be abandoned, she'll be left alone. Now, this is why it's so important that we grow up our inner children, or we bring the adult into the room of consciousness, because the truth is, the real truth is, if Kyle were to do this deeper level of work of dismantling her games, and let's say she were willing to bring her deeper truth to the world and to her personal relationships, and let's say she gets abandoned by her sisters, and she loses her marriage to Maurizio, and she has a dark night of the soul where truly she feels more alone than she's ever been. That's her opportunity to let herself go through the dark night of the soul, to be a kind parent to the inner child who needs to grieve, who needs to cry, who needs to have her heart broken, who needs to go through the discomfort of that disconnection from people that she loves. But the key here, what the adult can do is bring in an awareness that it isn't actually the end of the world like it would have been when she was a kid, right? The kid wants to go into a story of, see, I'm going to be alone forever. No one's ever going to love me. No one's ever going to see or hear me. If I speak up, I'm left alone and it's not fair. That's what the kid is saying. That's the story that gets attached to the feeling of heartbreak, which are actually two separate things. The feeling and the emotion is one thing. The story that we attach to it is another. And for a lot of us, we're attaching childhood stories to the feelings. So Kyle maybe gets abandoned by her sisters. She feels heartbreak. The child attaches a story of, I'm going to be alone forever. I'm condemned to be alone forever. And then she spins out. And then she starts trying to grab for control by playing her games again, right? Instead, if she can let herself feel the heartbreak and bring in an adult voice, which is just, ouch, this hurts. It's painful because I love these people. It's painful because I wanted more from these relationships. Let me just feel this and understand as an adult, I'm going to come through the other side. Well, then that's her changing the pattern. Because now she's no longer disconnecting from her own truth. She's no longer disconnecting from her own feelings. She's no longer compromising herself to settle for crumbs from people who don't fully see and hear her. She's fully seeing and hearing herself, changing her relationship to herself. And I've seen this time and time again. When we change our relationship to ourselves, we change our relationship to the outside world. Once Kyle goes through that dark night of the soul, I can guarantee you, because she's willing to be in integrity in her feelings, because she's willing to stand by her feelings, because she's willing to share her feelings, she will then start drawing in relationships with people who are on that same wavelength, who are willing to see and hear her, and who want to be seen and heard by her. I'm attempting to break down some very sophisticated material in very concise ways. But this is how we work with pattern. We have to identify the story that the inner child's writing and then update it to an adult story and then support ourselves just to clear out the feelings. We got to get into emotional reality with ourselves. Emotion, the etymological root of the word emotion is energy in motion. Emotions are energy inside our bodies. If you are holding back energy in your body, terror, rage, heartbreak, that is literally energy that's stuck in your body. And that is going to impact what you create in the world and what the world brings to you. So I feel like I said, Kyle's kind of really in the crosshairs of that tension between her desire for open, honest transparency and genuine relationship. And I think a childhood terror of being completely left alone in the depth of her heartbreak and her most painful feelings. So my hope and prayer for Kyle is that, I hope that she can really get the support she needs to do the deeper work. Because I could really see this going either way. I really feel that for her. I think she's at an impasse. This could go either way for her. She could keep doing what she's doing and play these games and skimming the surface of her own emotional life. And, she probably is going to have a really deep experience of not quite fulfilling relationships and feeling alone, even though she's surrounded by people. Or she can take that plunge with support into a deeper level of work, a deeper level of emotional honesty with herself, take the risk, go into the dark night of the soul, be a kind parent to her inner child, update her emotional life, and come out the other side experiencing a level of connection and relationship in the last third of her life that she's never experienced before, where she gets to bring all the wisdom of what she went through, all the wisdom of her survival strategies, because our survival strategies have wisdom.
they helped us survive. There's assets in our survival strategies. Kyle has created so much for herself. She's clearly a powerful manifester. So she could be bringing all of that to an emotionally integrated life where she doesn't have to play these little kid games anymore. All right, you guys, that's it for now. Definitely want to unpack more of Beverly Hills. As always, let me know your thoughts. And if these principles that I'm speaking about resonate with you, I'm going to include a link to a little form you can fill out to see about working with me. This is literally what I do with people. Identify those old inner child stories, separate the story out from the feeling, get people into emotional reality, show them how quickly their lives can change when they're willing to validate themselves, claim the truth of their experiences. So yeah, head over to the show notes, click on the link, and let me know you're interested. As always, you can find me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN. I always love hearing your own thoughts, hits, and intuition. And as always, I will see you on the flip side. Bye.